because what I really want out of this meeting is for us to listen to each other, discuss some of the recommendations and ideas. Because y'all can read the report and it's very easy to read. There's a lot of graphics. It's super informational. So I really do encourage everyone, if you haven't read it already, to go ahead and look at that. Okay, I think we're going to get started now. It's 7:05. Some people might still be coming in, but I want to respect everyone's time, and we're hoping to wrap this up in about, an hour and 15 minutes, because I know everyone's got a life. And so I got a question from someone, a direct message. Can you record this Zoom? So this is going to be recorded on Facebook. It's going to be live streamed, but the only caveat to that is when we go into our breakout rooms, that's going to be private. The only breakout room that is, okay, we are going to record it. So the only breakout room that's going to be recorded is if you're in a breakout room with me. So just letting y'all know about that. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you so much to everyone who is here. Thank you for bearing with us as we figure out all the technical difficulties. Despite doing Zoom for over 2 years, I feel like each time it's like a brand new experience. And, you've got all kinds of different people involved and numbers of people. I'm so excited to see the turnout tonight. 73 people and folks tuning in on Facebook. So that's really exciting. As many of you know, I am Commissioner Jack Porter. Just about every Thursday night at 7 p.m. I host a town hall, and sometimes we have special guests. Sometimes we take a really deep dive into an issue like tonight, and other times it's just an update about what's going on in my life as your commissioner, what's going on with the city, and an opportunity for folks to ask questions. It's not always easy to get in contact with your elected officials, and so I try to make it as easy as possible to stay engaged and stay informed. One more reminder, just if you can, to please do your best to keep your microphones muted so we can hear the speakers and just make it an all-around good experience for everyone. So at this point, I want to introduce, there's some feedback. Anyway, at this point, I want to introduce our sheriff, Walt Mcneil. And if you could just introduce yourself, provide some comments, and maybe tell us a little bit about where the idea for the report Anatomy of a Homicide came from.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Commissioner Porter, for getting this forum together. And it's delightful to see so many young people engaged and have a vested interest in these outcomes. And so I am really excited about the opportunity to share with you all. Let me start by saying where this came from is my over 40 years of being engaged in trying to come up with solutions to these ongoing problems of shootings across our nation. And one of the things we wanted to do at the very outset was not to rely on what we think is going on and what we anecdotally conclude is taking place in our community, but let's really do a scientific review of the data and see from the data what should we in fact be doing, what are some of the problems and issues. And that's what the Anatomy of a Homicide does. It looks at a 5-year period in which we had various shootings across our county, and from that we came away with a number of findings. And the ones I want to illuminate tonight, because of people being here, is the focus on the issues we know. For example, in our school systems, we know 5 years before a person actually goes into our detention facilities or go into alternative schools or are expelled from school, we know that person has several challenges that he has not been able to address on, nor have there been resources directed in his direction that will help him be successful in school and also be successful in life. It tells us that because the anatomy of a homicide indicated that the majority of the persons involved in shootings, but either the shooter or the person who was killed, the vast majority of them, it was known and they had been expelled from schools while in middle school, high school, or along the educational track. Additionally, those same persons, it turns out, were also either expelled from school or went to an alternative school. And from the alternative school environment, they then went into criminal activity. So we know that there are opportunities for us to have interventions at those particular crossroads. And that's what, at the end of the day, that's what the anatomy of a homicide does for us. It says, we know from the data and from the interviews we had with the students, young people themselves, we know they told us basically that most of them, many of them did not believe they would live to be 25 years or older, which tells us that we have to do some things differently in terms of how we interact with the kids. Now, it's a long process now, and I tell you, it's a very complicated status of men and boys process that we put together. But we're using the mental health model or community health model to try to address these number of men and boys in our community who have what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that those adverse childhood experiences manifest themselves oftentimes in the issues that you see in terms of crime, poverty, joblessness, drugs, and all those kinds of things. So we're going to, working with Florida State University, Florida A&M University, I am happy to say I had a conversation with Boys Town today, and we've got a formula for our schools that we will talk to Superintendent Rocky Hennell about. And the most important thing about this is that every aspect of our community is coming together around one issue so we can all put redress to it. And it won't be a random situation. What we hope to do in this with the anatomy of a homicide is specifically identify specific people. This is not a random situation. We will identify something in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 3,000 people that we believe are going through these processes and need assistance and help from the community. And from that, we hope to drive down the number of deaths and at the same time make our community safer. That's a real quick, fundamental way of introducing that to many of you. But as Commissioner Porter said to you, please go and read the document. It'll give you much more detail than the snapshot that I just gave you.
Well, thank you so much, Sheriff. That makes, that makes a lot of sense. I think doing the stakeholder engagement is critical, as you're describing. That's one of the recommendations, and I appreciate that background. One thing that I wanted to go over with y'all, and which the sheriff touched on, obviously, when I had the idea to host this, I realized that I'm not the first person to host a town hall on this issue. People have been working on this issue in our community and across the country for decades. But I am new to office, and it's important to me to hear from y'all. And the crime is on the increase. I mean, when I planned this, it was like 15 shootings ago. 26 shootings this month. So I think the urgency is there. It's always been an issue, but I hope that now is going to be the time that we really are jumping into action in an evidence-based way. I did want to go through some of the highlights from the Anatomy of a Homicide for those who have not yet read it, or maybe just want to brush up, and you touched on a lot of these issues, but as the sheriff said, the victims of these shootings and the offenders, they come from very similar backgrounds and demographics. They usually know each other. We're talking about young men, particularly men of color. Most of them live in our poorest zip codes. So these incidents are in many cases isolated in certain neighborhoods predominantly. Firearms are the primary weapon that's used in these cases. The second most being knives. the motives, the circumstances where these deaths are taking place usually come from disputes over drugs, theft. They involve some other crime that's taking place. Most offenders have a high school degree or the equivalent. None of them in this study had a college degree. Some had completed some college courses. Half of them had jobs. I know I'm rattling off a lot of data points here, but I do think it's important for us to really get a handle on, as the sheriff was saying, we can target our efforts because we know where this is happening and who is predisposed to this kind of behavior and entering into the criminal justice system. And there are so many warning signs that the sheriff's report was able to identify. Kids who had been suspended from school, kids who had committed crimes at a very young age and already had exposure to the criminal justice system. So all of these data points help us know that we can target our efforts, we can target our tax dollars and our energy in a really focused way to make the greatest impact. And I just have two more data points, and then I want to hear the sheriff comment if you have any anything else you want to add at this time. Most had already offended, most at a young age, and most do not trust law enforcement. 83% of people surveyed did not trust law enforcement. And that is a huge hurdle that we have to cross as a community in knowing how we're going to move people and how we're going to really break through to get to the bottom of this. And so I wanted to list those off, and then a final data point, and then I want to hear if the sheriff has any comments. One thing that just shocked me, because I think a lot of what I read, it confirms what we sort of knew to be true. But that's important too, because without that confirmation, you don't really know. But did y'all know the estimated cost per homicide shooting is $838,000, y'all. Think about that number, almost $1 million, and we are in shooting number 26. Mm-hmm. Now, those are not all homicide shootings, but I doubt the number is that much less. And you're talking about court costs, labor costs, law enforcement costs, funeral costs. I mean, it just goes on. And that does not even consider what we know, the emotional costs. If you're losing a family member, if you're losing a father, you're losing that income. And so Chris in the chat, 83% of the folks who were surveyed in this report did not trust law enforcement. So you can look into that in the report itself. So I provide that context that's coming from the report itself to frame the discussion we're going to have tonight. And so in a little bit, what I want us to do is go into breakout rooms. We have a couple of questions that we can, to guide the conversation. And again, I want to say to the adults who are here, I am so happy that you are here, but I really want to hear from our students. And so please, when we are in the breakout rooms, please prioritize our students' voices. We really want to hear from them, engage them. So, Sheriff, do you have any comment on some of the data points that I just listed off?
Well, just the latter discussion on the 83% not trusting law enforcement.
Yeah.
Is a crucial data point in that, and that's the reason why I've been asked, why don't you just run with that, Sheriff, and do the whole thing yourself without bringing all the other partners in? And my position on that is it would not bring the legitimacy to the process that I want to see there. I want this to be legitimate, where everybody's engaged, and there's a from the outset there's a degree of trust. Now I know there are a lot of people that trust me, Walt Mcneil, but this is about the institution of law enforcement, not about one person. And so it's crucial that we have this conversation. And I too, Commissioner, am waiting to hear what these kids have to say, or these young persons have to say.
Yeah, no, me too. Okay, so before we jump into that, I wanted to talk about some of the things that your office is already doing and dive and, just briefly, and then hear from you a little bit about some of the recommendations in the report. And then I wanted to throw out a couple of ideas just to generate discussion in the breakout group. So I wanted to see if you could just very briefly tell us a little bit about Back on Track.
Now, Back on Track basically is our effort to work with the Department of Juvenile Justice in a partnership where we identify, or DJJ identifies kids that are in their system that have committed some crime or what have you, that wound up being in the juvenile justice process. What we've done is those kids who are here in Leon County, what we've said is we'll work with DJJ, let us get those kids back. And what we do is come in once a week or so and sit down with a group of kids. And we as law enforcement officers, this is that trust thing we're talking about again. These kids hate us in some instances. I mean, they see us as the bad guy. We get in that room and we take off this facade of a uniform and all that kind of stuff and break down and share with these young people. Like myself, I grew up in Chicago on the South Side in the ghetto. Grew up on a tough side, getting in fights and all of that. But I had a mentor. I had sports to rely on. We talk about those things with these kids and let them know that we are human beings. And then, initially that conversation is going in the tank. But then something miraculous happens in those discussions. The kids start to come around. In fact, I had one kid we had Back on Track where he wouldn't speak to me for the entire period of time. But as we continued to talk, and the next day I saw him out in the community and he came over and shook my hand and said, it all came back to me now. I understand what you guys are trying to do. So the idea is we're working with those kids to get them, as we say, back on track. And we'll do anything we can. We try to get them in our Explorer posts. We try to get them jobs in our community. We try to make sure whatever the crime that they committed that got them into the system, we start working with their counselors, trying to make sure that we can get them back on track, if you will. So all of that back on track efforts. And we have another component of that we call Worship with Me. So these are two companion issues that we try to utilize. Worship with Me, and this is not about any one denomination or one religious organization. This is just, we ask any organization, worship organization, we talk to the families and say, we'd ask you to take these kids we're working with for Back on Track and see if you would spend at least two services with two faith-based services. If you take them to your church or your synagogue or your mosque and spend time interacting with this child in that environment, we ask you to do that twice. And then we'll come back and reevaluate and see where this child, what has happened. Well, actually COVID sort of put a damper on, but we were having some successes with these kids going, and then the families would turn around and we'd ask the families to go as well. And the families, at least one or two families, actually caught on. And then we had COVID take place and all the churches and synagogues all closed down. So we're going to reignite that whole process with Back on Track and Worship with Me, hopefully during this 2022.
Okay, awesome. That's great. And if y'all want to read, I really cannot say it enough. The report is easy to read. There's a lot of graphics. It's intuitive, and you can read a little bit more about what the sheriff's office is doing and some of the programs. I want to talk really quickly about some of the next steps that are identified in this report. One is to identify and engage those determined to be at most risk. And so that's a step that the community is going to be taking moving forward, and I'm sure is already involved in, and that involves, according to this, street outreach, social network analysis, identifying the most vulnerable groups. Second, providing targeted services to the identified individuals. This is something that I saw when I was working as a legal assistant at the public defender's office and later as a graduate student. We offer so many services to kids once they're in the system, and to adults once they're in the system. Services that had they had before, access to mental health counseling, access to recreational activities, good support systems, they might not need it later on. But giving them that support, job training, the programming, Focus on the areas, number 3, with the greatest amount of violence, which we know 1 is in city limits and 2 is in 3 specific neighborhoods or zip codes, which are also the poorest zip codes. So it's undeniable the connection between poverty and crime. And we knew this, and yet so many of our preventative efforts and policing efforts are not accompanied with the investment in underserved neighborhoods that you just need to make it successful. And then focus on the behaviors associated with violence. So illegal firearms, the mistrust in police and the criminal justice system, and robberies and drug dealing. So that's all a part of it. So the last thing I wanted to do before we break into our breakout groups, so we have about 35 minutes allotted for those breakout groups. So we really want them to be, so you guys can really get deep into some of these questions and conversations. And we'll post this in the chat, but how the breakout groups are going to go is we hope that y'all can introduce yourselves briefly. Your names, where you're from, whether or not you're students, why you're participating. And then we have 2 questions that we've left open-ended enough so that we can have a lot of dialogue. And the first is, why do you think that crime is increasing in Tallahassee? Or why do you think that there is crime in Tallahassee? And then second, what do you think needs to happen to reduce crime in Tallahassee? I think that there is crime in Tallahassee. And then second, what do you think needs to happen to reduce crime in Tallahassee? There is crime in Tallahassee. I don't know what that was, but if everyone can just make sure you're muted for now. Okay. And then, and then we're going to wrap up, and I want everyone, each group, if you can have kind of one person who's going to take some notes so that we can report back as a group and just hear. And I want to hear from y'all, not only what you're feeling, what you're thinking, but also what ideas you have, what you would like to see the city do, what you would like to see the sheriff do, what you would like to see in our community. Don't feel like we have to stay boxed in to what we've talked about tonight or what we usually do, but be open. So before we go, I had a few ideas that came from the community, from conversations I've had, as well as some ideas that come from the report, The Anatomy of a Homicide. Now, some of these were mentioned explicitly, and some of these are kind of my take on what I read in the report. And I just wanted to throw those out for discussion in your groups. So one thing the city has talked about is expanding our tempo program. Right now, we are relying so heavily on one program to do all of this work, and they really do not have the resources they need to do all of this work. And so I think a good start could be expanding that program, giving them more financial support, giving them more boots on the ground. And I did invite Dr. Thomas to be here tonight. He wasn't able to make it, regrettably, but that's a great resource for y'all, the Tempo program. But it's not a silver bullet. There's not a single silver bullet. The second thing that I thought of coming from the report is we need more programming at our recreational centers, more opportunities for kids to have things to do, to recreate, to build those relationships, to have adults that they can connect with. So that's an idea I wanted to throw out there. Another is restorative justice programming and training. We haven't mentioned this yet, but about 43% or more of the offenders talked about having trouble controlling their emotions, controlling their anger, and learning how to deal with those emotions when you're in a tough situation, and you're going to act on those feelings. Another, and some of these are short-term and some of these are long-term, investing money, real money, in supporting our neighborhood groups so that they can fortify their communities and build the bonds that we need to be successful as communities. Another that's mentioned in the report is investing in placemaking. Some of you might not even know what that is, but placemaking is, beautifying your community. When we have, something as simple as lights on trees, murals on streets, or whatever it is, that kind of thing that creates a sense of place. And then other things that we know have an impact on poverty and are kind of longer term solutions that I think we need to be investing in: affordable housing, public transit, making it so that people have access to jobs, access to other parts of town, the walkability, those kinds of things that we know increase quality of life and are proven to reduce poverty and crime. So I throw those out. I know there's been a lot of information thrown at y'all tonight, but I do this just to kind of get y'all thinking as we enter into these breakout groups. So we are going to post those questions in the chat, and we are now going to enter into those breakout groups. And once again, I really encourage the students who are with us to please use this opportunity to tell us what's on your mind and what you're thinking. We really, really want to hear from you. All right, y'all, thank you so much. And we're going to go into our breakout groups now.
In a minute.
In just a minute, we're getting that together now. Wow, y'all, we have 93 people. And everyone who's got their hand raised, or some of them, are our students. So I see at least 10. That's really exciting. And I see a comment from Dr. O'Con, who I served with on the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. Restorative justice is important. I recommend the book Forgiving Our Daughter's Killer, about a student at TCC who was killed by her boyfriend. If y'all do not know about restorative justice, I'm a believer. I'm curious to hear in the breakout groups what our sheriff thinks about that and how we can incorporate that. And thank you so much for your patience as we set up these breakout groups. And I really appreciate you taking your Thursday night to spend it with me and talk about these issues. I also want to take a point of personal privilege to thank my mom for being on this call, if she still is, Barbara Porter, and all the way from Clemson, and one of my aunts, Carol Romano, who's joining us from Mexico. So thank you all for being here and supporting me from afar. All right, where are we at on the breakout groups? Okay, so they should be starting now. Okay, so we're still dwindling down into our Facebook or into our breakout groups. So it should just be a couple more seconds. So are you going to know, Chris, when everyone's been? Okay, yeah. Let me know when. In their breakout. Okay, so everyone is in their breakout group. So this is our breakout group. So I have already introduced myself. So I was wondering if everyone who has the video capacity and is willing can turn on their video so we can interact a little bit with each other. And I was wondering, Zebrea, if you are on with us, if we can see your video, and if you would like to introduce yourself, and we'll give you a couple of seconds, and if you can, to join us. Okay, we will maybe give Zebrea a second, and I'm wondering if we can hear from Joya, are you there? And would you like to introduce yourself? Okay. Why, you're the lucky one, Walter McDonald. I see you. You've got your video on. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us why you're here briefly?
Well, good evening. My name is Walt McDonald. I am the current president of Providence neighborhood. And our neighborhood has been affected by a lot of this crime, a lot of this shootings. And so I'm here to better our neighborhood. That's why I'm here tonight and to learn as much as I can. Thank you for having this.
Thank you. All right, Zayed, I see you on the video. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. This is Zaid Al-Malki from Saudi Arabia. Right now, I'm doing my master in social work at FAMU. I am here because I want to learn like how can we like reduce the crime.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's so exciting. Thank you for being here. So Zebreya, you just messaged me. You are in the right breakout room. We were actually trying to split up the students so that everyone could hear from students. So if you are, I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but I would love to hear from you if you are there. So just let us know, but we'll move on. We'll give you some time. So Christine, can you introduce yourself and tell us why you're here? I see you trying to unmute yourself. Chris, can we unmute her? Yeah. We're gonna try and help you out, Christine.
Okay.
There we
Okay.
go.
All right. Thanks. My name is Chris Franzetti. I am a retired woman. Moved back to Tallahassee about 3 years ago and was saddened and just appalled and frustrated with how things seem to have changed since I left 7 years ago. I'm concerned. I'm tired of politics. I'm tired of people saying there's a problem and nothing seems to change. I don't know what I can do. I'm certainly open to hearing things, and I'm concerned and sad. So I thank you for doing this, and I certainly want to hear some constructive. And I'm glad Sheriff Mcneil did the report. I worked with him decades ago on the Partnership for Alcohol Responsibility, and he's wonderful. And if he can do this, if anybody can do it, he can do it. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Well, Rico Taylor, are you with us? Okay, well, let's get started then. And anyone who I wasn't able to get to, feel free to jump in at any point. So why do you think crime is increasing in Tallahassee? Chris, what do you think, having left and come back? Do you see a change?
I think there's a lot of racism, and I've really noticed that. So the poverty has increased when we have the poorest zip code in the state, and there's no services, no access. I just think economy and culture, to me, has, I don't work, so I'm not really out there. I'm just observing and what I read and that kind of thing. And that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah. Adrian, are you with us?
What do y'all got?
Or Rico?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Adrian, what do you think?
Honestly, I'm really excited to see such a powerful thing taking place, and I hope that out of all the great ideas we get tonight in the dialogue, we're able to take things from this and apply them to the community and really make the youth feel safe and like they can continue to speak. I think this is great. This is amazing. And I'm really just here to listen and see where I can be a part and jump in and work.
Thank you. Okay, Chris Smith, I just saw you jump in. Would you mind turning your video on and introducing yourself?
My name is Christopher Smith. I'm a student at James S. Ricketts High School. This is my last year, and I'm from Tallahassee, Florida.
Okay, thank you for being here. Zebrea, are you here? I know we've been messaging. If you have technical difficulties, that's okay. You can jump in at any point, okay? Rico Taylor, I see oh, Zebrea, there you are. Am I saying your name right?
I think she's muted.
Chris, can we unmute? All right, are you there now?
Yeah, I go to Leon High School. I'm a sophomore.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so I think we can get started with the questions now. Took us a little bit, or we already started. Why do you think crime is increasing? So, Chris Smith, who we just spoke to, I want to hear from you about why you think, is he still in this breakout room?
Yes, coming in now.
Okay, I'm so sorry, y'all. Thank you so much for, okay, there he is. People going in and out. Chris, since we have you, I want to hear from you about your thoughts on what's going on. 26 shootings this month. Why do you think this is happening?
Thank you, because I want to speak.
Okay, good. I want to hear from you.
I feel like a lot of people that do shootings don't feel like they have nobody to talk to. So the first thing they run to is the streets or to gangs or people they feel like, okay, these people listen to me and we go out and do bad stuff. And I feel like it's not the police or the people that's in the world, like people that first comers, they don't get out and tell people like, y'all have people to talk to. I feel like they do their job, but they don't come to us as teens and be like, hey, I got an event for y'all, come out, find people that y'all can connect with as teens to talk to. But some people do it, some people don't. But I feel like a lot of teens feel like they got to run the gangs and drugs to feel like they got somebody to talk to. And that's why I feel like a lot of shooting is going on in Tallahassee.
And do you think that, your friends or people who you know would actually talk to law enforcement?
Yes, the people that I hang around, we not shy people. We talk to law enforcement.
Yeah.
I like talking to law enforcement so that I can get my point across to know that I've been hurt by somebody that's in law enforcement. So yeah, people I hang around, they're not shy. They'll talk to law enforcement.
And what do you think, you touched on sort of some of the anger and people feeling like there's nowhere for them to turn or people for them to talk to, this lack of a support network. What do you think we could do in Tallahassee to break through that?
To throw like more events. I think it was the middle of January. We had went to an event, and we had went to go pick up trash in the Southside community. It was fun. It was a lot of people there. It was over 200 people or something. But we went to go pick up trash. Everybody bonded. Everybody got along. Even though it was different groups, we all talked to people in different places.
So more community events.
Yeah, more community events would be a good help.
Yeah. Do you know anyone personally who's been involved in any of these shootings or this kind of activity?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not kind of iffy.
Yeah.
Like heard about, but never like been in a personal space with.
Yeah. And what else? Do you have any other thoughts?
Not really.
Not really. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Zebrea, are you here? And do you have any thoughts on what we're talking about?
I do think there are probably more shootings, maybe because of like the pandemic and just people are stressed out from it. Like from the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs and having to be isolated can really take a toll on someone. So it could change their mindset and everything. So that's probably why more people are depressed and have bad anxiety and stuff like that.
Yeah. And do you have any, like when you're just going about your day, or when you visit other cities, are there things you think about like, oh, I'd love to see my city do this. I wish we had more of this.
Not really.
Yeah.
Tallahassee is kind of like there's not a lot of stuff to do in Tallahassee. Like you have to dig deep to find something to do, but there is like a lot of volunteering that people can do, and there is stuff that Southside does. That's what I know about. But no, not really.
So you're a sophomore, and what do you plan to do after you graduate high school?
After I graduate, I plan to probably go to FAMU or any other HBCU and study there. That's mainly like what I plan to do.
Do you think you want to stay in Tallahassee long term?
Yeah, to save money with my
Yeah.
parents, but I might move out of Tallahassee. Tallahassee is so boring.
Well, I mean, and the reason I ask those questions, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, is to sort of get at, what's going on in your head and kind of what you want out of your city,
Yeah.
and what we can do to engage you, because, that the thing you said, boring, I think a lot of people get into trouble because they are just bored. There's a lot of
Yeah.
other factors that have to do with it, but I think that's a good point. And I think that touches on what Chris was saying as far as having more programming, having more events, more activities. That's something that, I think the city and all our community partners have a role to play in. Chris, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, you're a senior, right? Are you staying in Tallahassee? What are your plans?
Yes, I'm actually going to TCC to get my associate's degree. It's a 2-year transfer. I'm going to school to be a nurse.
Okay.
And
You.
I plan on being in Tallahassee for 2 years, and then I plan on going to a college in Florida. But I do want to come back to Tallahassee to like help out, because I do feel like you should support where you're from if you feel like, because I feel like a lot of people that's famous that's from Tallahassee don't really come back and support. Yeah, but I will come back after I get my nursing degree.
Yeah. One thing that I'm hearing a little bit, and that I hear sometimes when some of these conversations, is a little bit of a lack of pride, in being from Tallahassee. And I think that's something that we can address, and that gets activated with more events and that kind of stuff. So I want to hear from Rico. We haven't heard from you yet. Are you here with us?
There he is.
Hey, we can hear you. How's it going? Okay, I couldn't hear you then. Can you speak again? All right, I can't hear you. I don't know if it's the headphone or what.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, we can hear you now. Yeah,
Okay.
so can you just introduce yourself and tell us why you're here and what you think on this topic?
Let me turn the volume up. I gotta leave the room. We on different phones up in here.
I'm sorry if we caught you at a bad
Okay,
time.
say it again.
I'm just wondering if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here.
I am here to listen to, what's the young lady name from Leon?
The Brea?
Brea and Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I like some of the comments that they're making. I am definitely interested in, trying to help come up with solutions that can help some of the young people, find something different to do, definitely find something within themselves that they like to do. More importantly, to have somewhere to be able to go do those things. It's one thing to want to have a passion for something, but it's another thing to not be able to go anywhere to actually, absorb or to find what you're passionate about, so to speak. So resources here in this town is a big thing for teens. We have the teen center, but we have one teen center. I heard earlier you was mentioning restorative justice. I was a part of restorative justice some years ago. I worked with a gang prevention program some years ago here in town in conjunction with the school board. So I've seen things come and go, so to speak, or whatnot. But when you mention restorative justice, what came to mind was one location is not going to do it. Restorative justice is cool, but let's have a restorative justice on Basin Street. Let's have a restorative justice on the South Side. Let's have a restorative justice over by the Tallahassee Mall area. So we need different pockets of the same thing, so to speak. You know, one area is not going to do it. You know, we have, I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent because I just started rolling.
No, that's okay.
There are some things that I think that some kids could use, you know, where, you know, again, pockets of teaching how to code, you know, pockets of teaching kids Excel. For example, when we deal with teenagers, these kids can get certified within 6 weeks in Excel, and some of these kids can get OPS jobs with the state. You know, so we have a lack of transportation with a lot of these teenagers. So if we can boost up transportation in different pockets and get some of these kids some jobs. Right now, jobs are huge. Definitely for restaurants and things of that nature. That's a huge component / pocket for kids. You know, I think money in the pocket will solve a whole lot of problems first.
Yeah.
Money, restorative justice in different pockets, kids being able to have more than one place to go, to be able to dwell into their passion, so to speak, you know. And then more importantly, we got to see what's going on in the homes. Because if we gonna restore these kids and then send them back to the house, what is the house looking like?
Yeah.
You know, so that also plays a huge component as well. I know it's about kids, but ultimately it's about the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
No, I hear you. I agree 100%. Thank you for your comments. I want to hear from Zipporah if you're here. Because you're looks like you're new to the group. If you can introduce yourself. And then I was wondering if Sheriff Mcneil is still here, if he had any questions for the group or for Chris and Zabraya, especially, who are here with us. And I do want to recognize also Miss Perkins, who joined the group and who has been really, really involved for a long time. Thank you for joining us. So, well, Miss Perkins, while we're waiting on Zipporah, are you there? You can take your time. I know I'm calling on you.
I know, right? I am here.
Hi.
But I am.
Okay, awesome. So can you just introduce yourself and maybe tell us what you're thinking about this conversation?
Well, I'm Zipporah Burgess. I've been a big for about 4 years or more. And I kind of came in late. I was trying to figure out what was going on with my audio. I could see people talking. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm coming in at the last and don't know what is really being said because I couldn't hear half of it. So sorry.
No worries. Okay, well, so let me tell you some of the questions. So we're talking about, you know, why do you think that crime is increasing in Tallahassee, and what do you think we can do about it?
Well, I think crime is increasing in Tallahassee a lot because we don't have an outlet for most of our teens. We do have some programs where I know a lot of kids that I would talk to, they weren't necessarily, they thought, oh, with karate, oh, that's fighting. Why would I do that? But actually, it teaches you discipline. So unfortunately, a lot of the parents that I do come in contact with, they can't afford that. And I know when my little kids were smaller, that was one of the things that we did, karate. And then what about teaching them? I like what the last little bit I heard about when you said, I heard money in the pocket. So what about teaching them, okay, well, teach them how do I get the honest way to get money in the pocket. So one way would be teaching them how to hold a proper conversation, interviewing skills, maybe identifying what it is they like to do. Some actually can cook. Some parents do teach their kids how to cook. So guess what? Maybe you could work at a restaurant and then up your skills, maybe go into chefing or something like that. So yeah, I just think it's just a matter of them not having something to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. All right, I see a caller, 850-668-4447. I want to give you an opportunity just to speak if you want to. So I'll give you a few seconds if you want to unmute yourself. Feel free to do that. And again, just thank you everyone for bearing with the Zoom process. It's not always easy. It's not always pretty, but we're working with what we got. And I think a lot of times it is a great forum to have these discussions.
Mr. President,
Yes.
let me just
Yes,
chime in.
please.
In the conversations I've heard, very insightful comments, particularly when we talk about this not being a single focus problem that involves a family. And that's what we're trying to do with our focus on men and boys, particularly relationships that men and boys have with their families or the lack thereof. And that's one of the major components of what we're trying to put together in our community. That's a whole wraparound delivery of services, again, built on that medical model. And we're going to need, this is, and I'm happy to hear people talk about this generationally. When a young man says he's going away and coming back, because we really have to look at this as a generational issue that we have to start now changing generations and putting things in place here in Tallahassee, Leon County that solidifies families and give them sustainability over a long period of time. We've had programs, and this is not about programs. This is about lifetime engagement between the community and those of us in governmental positions in our community. So I am tickled to hear what the young people are saying, and I think they're right on point.
Thank you, Sheriff. And one thing I was thinking about, that was in the report is that most of these people actually said that they felt safe in their neighborhoods. And it made me think about how, it seems likely to me that so much of the, or a component of this is ways to feel safe in your neighborhood by making yourself, stronger or more of a threat than anything else around you. Because I thought that was really interesting. Despite their saying that there's crime, it's easy to get drugs, it's easy to get firearms, they still felt safe. What do you think about that?
Well, I totally understand that. As a kid growing up again, south side of Chicago, with a game called the Disciples, I was safe when I was in around my guys in the game. So that was our story. So we felt safe. So I'm not surprised at all about that. When you go outside of that, particularly when you come in contact with law enforcement and others, so I can understand their perspective that that's perhaps the safest place there can be is on their turf.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Okay, so any quick final thoughts? We're gonna now, in a little bit, come into back as a group and hear from the folks about what was discussed in their breakout groups. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that now, and then we're gonna wrap up. All right, so that's just gonna take a few seconds as we all come back in. Okay, just 1 minute. So, any final thoughts while we're here? Steve, I see you're unmuted. Anything you want to add?
Add to.
Oh, we're all coming back in. Don't worry. I'm sorry, Steve.
Oh yeah, I just came in.
We're all popping back in. We're all popping back in, and it just takes a little bit. I'm seeing it tick up.
Commissioner Porter, I just wanted to say one thing. Thank
Yes.
you for hosting this. Thank you, Chair, for being here, and for everyone else. We were on a committee meeting tonight, the Criminal Justice Committee, and I just had a chance to get into this meeting. So I'm here tonight to listen. And again, thanks. I certainly have some comments, but probably not tonight. And well, I will say this one thing. I think that we have to be honest about some of the things that are going on with our families. We are responsible for our children. Law enforcement can't be everywhere and do everything. We've got to deal with the reality of raising our children, being concerned about, them, their whereabouts, and their actions and their activities. And as a mother and now a grandmother, that's very, very important. So I've heard these conversations for 40 years. It's the same conversation. It's just different people talking. And we're talking about some of the same things. And programs can't save our children. Law enforcement can't save them. There has to be a collaborative and collective effort. There are many, many pieces to this puzzle. And, everybody has to believe that we can do it, but we have to work together to get it done. So we'll have an opportunity to have some future conversations, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Perkins.
Hey.
I really appreciate it. And, I want to thank everyone who is here on this Zoom, who has been doing that work for years in this community, because I can only imagine. I mean, I feel discouraged at times, and I have not been doing this for that long. And so I want to thank everyone who has been out there fighting the good fight for years and years and years, being involved in people's lives, raising your kids, being good parents, being a good neighbor. Thank you for doing that work. Okay, so now we're going to start with our report backs from the group. So if you could raise your hand, y'all know how to do that. If you could raise your hand if you are a team leader who's going to report back, and then we're going to go one by one and call on you, and we'll give you about a minute each to talk. Okay, so let's start with Adner. Why don't you go first?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully my internet is not spotty today. I met with a wonderful group of, we had three in middle school. We had one 7th grader, two 6th graders, one in elementary and 5th grade, and one high schooler in Lincoln, and that kind of made up our little group. Some of the issues that was shared amongst the group is that some of the reasons of why the violence is the way that it is because there was a lack of restriction for gun control in Tallahassee, not raising the age of when people can get weapons, people making gun violence and crime in the city look popular, not having something productive to do, and people making killing other people a popular thing to do within the city. Some of the solutions that my group came up with was one, taking down gun shops and advertisements for gun shops within our city, revisiting our firearm laws and ordinances within the state and the city, making a effort to confiscate guns off of our streets and to buy them back. We also talked about making sure that people were not afraid of the police. Some other suggestions that came in was perhaps making therapists available to students at the schools who want to chat with them or after school, and making anger management available to individuals before they got in trouble. Some of the other solutions came back with lack of funding that the students are interested in. And this group came up with, they would like to see more funding at our Boys and Girls Club. Some of them are participants in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. They would like to see more funding in that. There was a mentoring program hosted by the ladies of Zeta Phi Beta that they would like to see programs to, as well as a program called Girls to Divas. In the Springfield Community Center, that group had some programs that they would like to see more initiatives and funding towards, which is our Smart Girls program, Passport to Manhood, as well as the Street Smarts program, and also to make sure that there is funding towards transportation. A lot of these services are offered at our community service centers, and there's a lack of transportation. And last but not least, there was a mention that some of the programs that they're interested in was the FAMU ETS, which is the Educational Talent Search Program, and making sure that that is out there for our community. So those were the collective feedback of our group. And I'd like to say I'm very inspired by our young people. And thanks for entertaining me tonight.
Aw, thank you. Thank you so much, Adner. And thank you so much to your group and everyone who participated. It sounds like it was an awesome conversation. Okay, so now we're going to go to Bill Davis for you to report back on what your group talked about.
Thank you. We too had a great group. We had high school teachers, high school students, college students, program workers, professionals that are working in this field. The thrust of, we started out with saying that gun violence is a label for a larger problem, that the problem is systemic racism and poverty, that the people involved in a lot of this gun violence and in some of these neighborhoods where it's most intense, the younger people don't see any way out. They don't see where an education can even get them because they haven't been beyond the limited horizons that they're afforded in the poverty situation in which they live. That we need the leaders in this community to do more than just listen, but we need action. And we're not talking about the commissioners in particular or the commissions. We're talking about the leadership of this community at all levels, business, social, and otherwise. It feels like in these neighborhoods that nothing has been done, that there's been just a lot of talk. That we need people to be authentic, to be authentically advocating for real change on the commissions and at the sheriff's office and in the police department. So then in terms of programs and things that can be done, a lot of times, some of these young people aren't succeeding in the school the way that it is. They need an alternative. They don't see an alternative presently, other things to do. And it's not a situation that can be cured just by having more sports programs and after school programs, for example, although those are needed. They're going to be expensive to afford safety for everybody there, et cetera, for the schools, but more broader programs. And this was a real incisive moment from one of our high school students. Teach them how to help other people. They want to know how to be of service. And if you could take some of these resources, someone specifically brought up the money going to the football stadium, for example, for economic development. If that was used for, I'll say workforce development, but to help train these kids like in a program and how they can help in their neighborhood and teach them some skills, and then including job interviews and all of that. And one young person said, "Teach us how to prevent street violence." I think that pretty much summarizes it. I know I've gone over a minute, but I've done my best. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. All right, next I want to hear from, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Nadeja Pierre.
Hello, it's Nadej Pierre.
Oh, Nadej, that's beautiful. All right, thank you for being here.
With my group, sadly, we didn't have any youth in our group, but we were comprised of teachers, youth serving organizations, and some students from FAMU. And the broad thing about our conversation was just taking it back to the basics of where did this crime start to rise? What was it like back then for those who were raised in Tallahassee versus what it is like now? And the conversation was simple of that it took a village to raise, a child. So that's really missing in this community these days of, a neighbor being able to tell a child like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, and then being respectful and really taking that in, and then we also touched on just parental support, and just parents being more involved in working with schools and boys and girls clubs and all of the other programs to help us do this together as a unit, because we can't do it alone. So that was really the basis of our conversation. We wish we had kids there, but we just spoke on the behalf of just people, teachers and people who work with students here in Leon County.
Thank you so much. That's great feedback. And one of the things that a lot of these things we know are related, obviously, and part of, missing the village mentality, the community needing to support parents so that they can support their kids, increasing people's quality of life, making sure that they're making a living wage so that they don't have to work 3 jobs or 2 jobs, so that they have time to be there. We know all of this to be true, but then when the rubber meets the road, we just don't make the investment. And I want to bring it back to that number, that $838,000 per shooting. We literally cannot afford to not make the investments now to save lives and to just save, the soul of our community. I mean, it's true. It sounds dramatic, but it's really, really true. And I think this month alone has been a wake-up call for me and a lot of people. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay, now I want to hear from Janya, and please correct me if I said your name wrong.
Janaya.
Janaya, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. All right. All right, go ahead. We want to hear from you.
Okay. So we only had one young person in our group, but we had a great group. Some of the reasons that we identified as reasons for increased crime, alcohol and drugs, toxic relationships, not knowing how to resolve conflict, social media, and need to find another way to make money. A lot of the jobs that high schoolers would normally have, college students have taken those jobs because we're in a college town. So that was some of the reasons that we identified.
Point. Yeah.
How to help, remove the guns off the streets, parental assistance, and just kind of getting the parents more involved and helping with things such as transportation, maybe funding, maybe they want to help more, but maybe they don't have like gas or the means to, transport and do different things like that. We talked about having a community school where they have like the school and then they have the psychologist, the medical center, the preschool, like everything all in one area in the middle of the community. And for like community leaders and politicians to talk directly with the kids. This is a start, this is great. But just kind of like talking directly to the kids and kind of seeing how they feel and what their input is and how they think we can make the community better.
Well, thank you so much. That's really helpful feedback. And I think something that, as I'm hearing this, and some of y'all might be thinking as I'm thinking, like, we've all heard this before and it feels insurmountable and it feels overwhelming how many needs there are and how few resources are available right now to meet these needs. But I hope that in hearing this, we don't feel discouraged, but we all feel motivated to do our part and to do the best that we can to meet these needs, but definitely to keep the pressure on, to keep the heat on your decision makers, your politicians, the people spending that budget and your taxpayer money. That accountability is essential. So Chris, I think what she's talking about is that a lot of the jobs that teens would usually do, because we're a college town, a university town, we're taking up those jobs, which makes a lot of sense. And that's something that I had not thought of. So I think that's really, really interesting feedback and shows that we need to, go above and beyond to provide those job opportunities to our teens. Okay, next I want to hear from Dr. O'Con.
Well, we had a really wonderful group, and we had a young person who's 11 years old who goes to Griffin Middle School and another one who's 13 who goes to Fairview. And then we also had 2 MSW graduate students from FAMU, a retired educator, a retired nurse, and so on. But regardless, I'm not going to talk much about question 1 because those points have been made by the other groups, except to say that our young people said that there's not enough opportunities for people to express themselves in healthy ways, and that the schools are not doing a good enough job to prepare students for life after high school. So I thought those were interesting points. And then regarding question number 2, one of our group members said that after reading the report, he found that the expulsion rate from our local schools was really disturbing. And he recommended that Leon County schools consider a mentoring program as an alternative to expulsion, which is a really good suggestion. And I pointed out to him that we had studied expulsion in the local schools and found that there is tremendous variation in principals. Some principals expel at the drop of a hat. Other principals never expel students. And having some consistent training and communication for principals on this topic of keeping young people in school would be a critical step to take, because once students are out of school, that sets into motion a series of bad things. Also, our group emphasized spreading more awareness about mental health, letting people in the community know what kind of access they have to mental health information and where they can get services, because this is something that is needed by both parents and children. And mental health services that are geared toward families are something that our group felt would be very important. So providing and disseminating more information about good mental health and where to get services is a really important step too. So that's just a quick summary of what we talked about, and we had a great discussion.
Thank you. I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you so much for that feedback. You know, I think that your point about consistency and expulsions from schools is a really interesting point. That is something that I had not considered. And, you know, the report talks about this a lot, but I personally, you know, being new to this role, do not see the collaboration that and communication that we need to have to address these issues. We are a really unique government or we're a unique county because we've got one city in one county. And, you know, I don't have the relationship that I would love to have with our county commissioners, with our school board members, with our sheriff. And that's on all of us to build that, because, and I know there are a lot of partnerships that I'm not even aware of, and some that have taken place and maybe are no longer, but you know, the all in catchphrase it's not a joke. You know, we really, there is no way we're going to get through this if we're really not all in together and trusting each other to do our part and believing best intentions. So I appreciate that feedback. Okay, David O'Keefe, can we hear from you about your group?
We certainly can. Our group was Aiden, Shannon, Earl, Danrielle, Dominique, and myself. And we were lucky enough to have 14-year-old from Griffin, college student who does work at Griffin, and let's just say older than 25, Griffin graduate. So focusing just on the things from the young folks is everybody right now is in time of need for money. And so they do crime to get easy money. Even if there were part-time jobs available, they believe some people would still do the crime or violence for easy money. And then even for the kids, when you're getting supportive programs, they're lacking support at home. They need adults there to support them and be there. And then also it's difficult to break out of this because all the people they're with, they know, and all people their age are into this crime or violence. So it's difficult to just hang out with all people who are much older, stay away from that. And then real briefly summarizing what over 25 mentioned is putting more resources in to have more programs. However, there have to be programs that are trusted, that come from and are led by people in the same community rather than being transported in. And because a parent, for example, here is going to have to build trust before they go sending their kid on transportation out to some other thing. And that they want ideally that resources are given and the community from within the community leads those programs.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, David. I think that's a great point. And I think, you know, the transportation point has been brought up before, but, you know, and we do not want to fuel gentrification. We don't want to create more problems with solutions. But I do think that giving people the opportunity, you know, transit connects people to jobs, connects people to different social networks, connects people to different services. You know, I'm always saying that, and it's not the only thing, of course, we know that, but I really think it's not emphasized enough, especially in a community like ours that is so car oriented, you know, what an impact and what a difference that could really, really make. Okay, I'm not sure if Chris Smith is still with us. I'm going to call on you if you are willing to report back about our group. We had it was a little messy, people in and out, some technical difficulties, but if you are there, I'd love to hear just your summation of what we discussed and your thoughts.
I'm still here.
All right, awesome. Go ahead.
Basically what our group was talking about was how we feel like some teams are bored and they feel like they don't have no one to go to as teenagers. So they feel like the only thing they have to run to is gang violence and drugs. And so basically what we were saying was that we should do more teen outings. Like I had told my group about when we did a community cleanup and how all the teens were bonding with other people, and we had some FAMU groups out there that were bonding with us. And basically we were just talking about how we need to get more police officer and first servers out to help teens and let them know that they're not alone out here. And that's what we got from our groups.
All right. I think that sums it up pretty well. We were lucky to hear from you and a few other students. I don't think we can, you know, underestimate what people do when they're bored, you know, and the sense, another thing that we talked about is having a sense of pride in our communities and in ourselves and how important that is. Okay, well, I do want to wrap up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I wanted to thank everyone again for being here. We are going to post a link in the chat for some more feedback, and you can give feedback on this, you know, the format that we had here, because we're trying out different things, as well as the discussion we had. I do want to provide some follow-up. And it was really good to meet some of y'all remotely. I'm always excited when I see names of people who I don't know, because I don't want to be talking to the same 5 people all the time. So I really appreciate it. And I do want to give, a shout out to Commissioner Richardson, who is here. I didn't see you earlier, so I really want to thank you for being here and all the work you do and have done. And then Sheriff Mcneil, a big thanks to you for being here, for your support, your leadership for this report. And I would like to give you the opportunity to close us out with whatever thoughts you have, words of encouragement, challenges, whatever you want to leave us with. We want to hear from you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and thank all the persons who were involved tonight. This was a fantastic discussion. One of the things that's really important about this is a sense of urgency, the speed of change. We used to go and look at every 10 years as a cycle of change. I was looking this week at Zuckerberg saying that Facebook is now changing itself from Facebook to Meta. And why are they doing that is that they're expecting huge changes in our society over the next year or so. They're talking about more virtual learning, these virtual environments, which means we have to have the urgency of trying to get our kids into a better space, or they will continue to be left behind. And it's crucial, it is absolutely crucial that we all, and I think you said it, Commissioner, that we have to be all in, focused on this particular problem, because it impacts the entire community and it impacts generations and generations to come. And that's why I'm hoping that so many of us will agree and come together in trying to address this issue that I'm calling the status of men and boys. Obviously, men and boys are at the focal point of the shootings that are taking place, but more importantly, they're at the focal point of our future. And we've got to do a better job. And I'm hopeful that we'll get support, as you talked about, Commissioner, from all the entities in our community coming together around this most important issue for our community. Thank you again, Commissioner, for putting this together. And I hope to have many more conversations about not talking about it, but actually taking some things and putting them into action here soon.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. And I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm looking forward to that. All right, everyone, take care. Have a good night, and we will be in touch. So love y'all. Have a good night. Stay safe.
Good night.